Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good afternoon, everyone. Phil Pinarski here with the News 8 Live Desk. Hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I know it may not necessarily feel like it right now, but winter is certainly on its way here in West Michigan, and it can be a little bit difficult, a little bit panicky maybe. Maybe that's some of the things you're feeling to kind of get ready for the actual winter. I know, personally, I'm not looking forward to all the snow. But the good thing is that the good people over at Storm Team 8 have outlined and given us an idea of some of the things that we can expect this winter, and two of the faces of Storm Team 8 have joined us now on the live desk today. Storm Team 8 meteorologists Blake Carms and Scott Larson are here today to talk about the winter outlook, kind of give us an idea of what we can expect, answer some of your winter weather questions, and then we're also going to be talking about a pretty awesome contest that you can now take part in and possibly win $250. But first things first, Blake and Scott, thank you both so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Of course, really ready to talk about the weather, maybe not the winter weather, but I did want to kind of talk about, because we have seen such a unique, at least for my own, just in the time that I've been here, sort of a unique winter, kind of lead up into winter, a unique fall. We've had these dry conditions, these super hot temperatures. It hasn't really gotten that cold yet. I mean, we've only seen maybe a handful of frosts even in the morning, I feel like. How difficult was it kind of outlining this winter, knowing that we really haven't had much of really any kind of semblance of the regular fall even?
Yeah, at last check it was 62 degrees outside here in Grand Rapids. Winter is going to come, even if we aren't feeling it just yet, and usually what we look at is kind of past analogs. So we try to look at certain patterns that occurred in past years and then come to conclusions based off of that. So that's a lot of how our winter weather forecasting goes as far as this preview is concerned. So we looked at past weak La Niñas in particular. It's when you have some cooler than average ocean waters off the coast of South America. And we are starting to enter that phase, and it looks like that's going to be able to dictate the weather that we experience here locally as we go through this winter.
But it was fun, kind of everybody working together, right? I can assume that, at Storm Team 8 always puts out such great content, so then you guys you guys kind of do it on your own basis. There's Ask Ellen, and then Blake's got the school closing predictions, Matt's got the winter weather forecasting. I mean, just being able to all work together on something like this, how great was that?
It's fun. It's a big collaboration, and everyone kind of has different ideas. We all kind of look at different things. Matt in particular is such an exceptional winter weather forecaster, especially long range, and he picks up on things that I would say a lot of us don't even necessarily think of. Right. So it's been fascinating to learn from him and just to kind of walk through the different components. So you can look back on our previous few winters and realize that we went from our third snowiest winter to one of our less snowy winters we've ever had. Right. You can look back on, like Scott mentioned, analog years, so years that were similar to this one, knowing that they're not always the same. So there are several different avenues we can take, and it's fun to collaborate as a group and kind of compare notes and see where we were at. And many of us were kind of in the same spot.
Yeah.
Right. All right, awesome. Well, before we get into the winter outlook, guys, we're going to be letting you guys kind of have free reign to talk about what you guys are expecting. But first, I do want to open up the live desk to everybody watching, that if you've got any specific questions regarding the winter that you think either of these two gentlemen might be able to answer, please go ahead and leave them down below. If you're watching us on Facebook, we're going to get to as many of them as possible before the end of the stream. But like I said, I'm going to get out of the way and let you guys kind of handle everything regarding the winter outlook now.
Well, starting off with last winter, or some semblance of winter, lasted basically just 2 weeks. As you can see, that we had that pocket of colder than average temperatures, which was with us right through the heart of January, basically. And outside of that, it was far warmer than average. And we also saw, as Blake mentioned, not a whole lot of snowfall here in Grand Rapids. Our grand total was only 47.5 inches. The average amount that we receive over the course of a winter is closer to about 77 inches of snow in Grand Rapids. So we certainly underachieved on that front.
Scott, I do want to mention, I think you came right when, in January, that same week
Perfect
that we had a
timing on
winter.
that.
Yeah, my first day was supposed to be on a Sunday, pretty much right in the middle of that cold pocket. And there was a blizzard that occurred back where I was in Iowa, and it basically moved its way straight into Michigan. And even after waiting a couple days and then driving out here, I mean, there were just countless semis in the ditches and just clear evidence of the kind of mess that that storm had made. So.
Yeah.
Set the scene for you coming up here, I think.
Yeah, well, I made it.
Exactly.
I made it. And, then I got here, and it did snow continuously for about 10 days in a row. Not really a whole lot each day, but it kind of set up, what my expectations should be here in West Michigan.
Mm-hmm. One part that made that stretch so severe was the lake effect. And we had the cold air moving over the lake. And a trend that we've been noting over the last few years is that lake ice has been very low. It's been hard to build up hardly anything. And that's even felt on a small scale when you think about the area ponds and lakes. Even those have had a hard time freezing up enough for people to skate on or ice fish on. Lake ice is exceptionally low last winter, and lake temperatures this fall are the warmest they've been in the last several years. In fact, this does a good job of showing about the extent that we saw on the Great Lakes this past winter.
Yeah, only 2.5% roughly on Lake Michigan covered with ice at the middle of February in 2024. And check out Lake Erie. They had to drag it out to the 100th place, 0.05%. So, clearly a sign that it was very warm. Now, as we go through this winter, there's a signal that we are going to have some wetter than average conditions. This comes to us from the Climate Prediction Center. This isn't necessarily going to provide a whole lot of relief from the drought conditions that we've experienced, though. Especially once we get some colder air in, you experience a lot of runoff as the ground is frozen and can't really receive the moisture. But again, we are starting to, this month, see some more precipitation for sure, and it looks like this is going to be a wet week. As we have round after round of rain and even a little snow that could be entering the picture tomorrow night into Thursday.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons why that precipitation is expected to be above average around here is because of the storm track. We're expecting numerous either Alberta Clipper systems or classic Colorado lows. And the part that makes it tricky is that could be in the form of rain or snow. As we see here on this map, we're likely going to be near average temperature-wise or slightly warmer than average. In fact, I'd probably lean towards slightly warmer than average here. So that means that even though we have an active forecast with more precipitation expected, it's going to depend on the event, whether that falls as snow or rain or a mix. And that's always, of course, one of the harder things to forecast. But the general trend is for warmer than average conditions to the south and east. And for us in the Midwest, we're expected to be in somewhat of a transition zone.
You guys did touch on, obviously, the La Niñas were something you guys were looking at. Now we're getting kind of a look at the graphic of kind of just explaining what we've seen sort of in the past.
We have that phase change happening in ENSO, which is it's going from an El Nino toward a La Nina. It's going to be a weak La Nina, but even still, here's some of the past outcomes that have occurred with that setup. Most notable being 2022 into 2023 with 110 inches of snow. Ellen and Matt have talked about that season quite a bit with me and how there were, even though there was a large total for snowfall, there were a lot of freezes and thaws. Yeah. So the snow didn't really take residence on the ground for too long. There you can see some of the other instances where we had this trend in the past too, 2017-18, yielding about 72 inches of snow, near 60 inches, 2016 and 17. The other total that stands out there, 2008-2009, with close to 105.
It really is tricky. One thing that's interesting is the weaker the La Nina, typically the more volatile our winters tend to be, the more topsy-turvy our winters tend to be, and that's when you tend to see those totals up and above 100 inches. So it really is going to depend on just how strong that La Nina actually ends up being. But as Scott mentioned, 2 winters ago, we had our third snowiest. But if memory serves me right, it was our 5th least days with snow on the ground. So we just kept getting dumped on, and then it would melt the next day. So the good news is I think that's less likely to occur this year, at least to some extent, to hopefully we can keep the snow on the ground at least a little bit longer than we have over the last few years.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on the polar vortex. It can take on kind of one of two modes. You either have a stable polar vortex where a lot of the coldest air is locked away toward the Arctic. With the weak La Nina setup that we have this year, it looks like this will favor a more disrupted polar vortex, so a more active storm track. And with that, you can have colder, more volatile conditions where you have these punches, these cold air intrusions which occur out of the Arctic. And with that, we can get blasted with snow. But then there's also a greater potential for thawing things out, so that snow could be erased within a couple of days. So it could follow a kind of similar trend to what we had, as Blake mentioned a couple of years ago. We'll just have to see how things play out, but again, looks like we are going to follow with that more disrupted pattern.
Yeah, polar vortex visits tend to be our most prolific lake effect snow events. When we get the prolonged cold air with winds coming out of the northwest, that's when we really tend to get hit hard with lake effect here in West Michigan. And more visits from the polar vortex would in theory mean more lake effect snow events. And of course, we've talked about the lake being wide open and warmer than it has been. One other interesting note I want to make is that even looking at the extended forecast into December, you can already tell the polar vortex is disrupted a little bit, where it keeps wanting to kind of poke its way down. So I think that's a sign of what's to come, and overall a fairly active winter with several chances for storm systems.
Every time I hear polar vortex, I always think back to college. I think it was 2019, maybe.
Yes.
And just the negative, you see it on your phone, the negative 60-degree wind chills, and just knowing that's still out there definitely is.
Could come back.
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
Thankfully, we're insulated on this side of the lake because you went to school over in Milwaukee,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
thankfully on this side it gets cold, but not as cold.
I have noticed that Milwaukee, not necessarily a lot of snow, but frigid temperatures. Here, not as cold, lots and lots of snow. So don't really know which one I'd rather be dealing with.
Pick your poison.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, here's a look at our average monthly snowfall, and obviously, as you can see, we're only halfway through the month of November, but we have yet to pick up any measurable snow. Interestingly enough, December is our second snowiest month, and that's a little hard to believe, with the exception of 2 years ago when we had the Christmas week blizzard. December has been a very quiet month for us snow-wise for as long as I can remember. Can't really think back on too many Decembers as of late where we've had a very active December. So it looks like that may change this year, but historically January is our snowiest month of the year, and then you can see the drop off a little bit. February tends to be our coldest month, or close to our coldest month, but not our snowiest, and then eventually into March that tends to go down a little bit.
Yeah, and here's a look at some of our recent first measurable snow events that have occurred over the past 5 years. Of course, Halloween last year, very memorable here in West Michigan. You can see that generally that ranges between the end of October and the second week of November, so we're already a little behind schedule, I suppose. November 20th in Grand Rapids is when we average seeing our first inch of accumulation. I guess we could dovetail into talking about the chance of snow.
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up. We talked about we haven't seen any snow yet, but that's not, again, winter is coming. It's not going to be like this forever. Yeah,
it looks like as we go through tomorrow night and Thursday, there's a good likelihood that we will have some snowflakes mix with rain. So, outcomes in forecast models showing about 1 inch to 2 inches, but have to take that with a grain of salt, and that ground temperatures are still near 50 degrees. So a lot of that initial wave of snow would very likely melt off. Daytime highs on Thursday are also going to be poking up near 40. So that's also going to be another limiting factor. We have very warm lake temperatures, as Blake alluded to, which also helps to moderate out the colder air mass sitting over us. So when you take all of that into totality, I think that we'll see some snowflakes. It could make for some good pictures for the gram. But as far as actually stacking up, I don't see a whole lot of that coming to fruition, or at least maybe on grassy surfaces for a couple hours.
Right.
Could make for a messy commute on Thursday morning, but that looks to be about the extent of the impact there.
It's a very tricky system because it's actually the low is going to be kind of circling around the state, and unusually the southern side of the low is most likely to get snow, and so that's very unusual for us anyway. Typically the northern side of the low pressure system gets the snow, so trying to figure that component out. And as Scott mentioned, the really warm ground temperatures, it's always tough this time of year how much would actually stick versus melting. Obviously if it fell at night, that would be more conducive to getting it to stick, but like Scott mentioned, first snowflakes are fairly good bet, I think, at this point, but accumulating impactful snow, that's a little less likely.
Yeah, no, definitely something that we're going to be keeping an eye on. And I know you guys are going to be telling us whenever we can expect those first flakes, because I can see it in the comments section right now. A lot of people do have a lot of snow-based questions. So we're going to get to those in just a little bit. I do want to remind everybody that if you do have questions for either Scott or Blake, please leave them in the comment section below on our Facebook page. We will be getting to those in just a little bit. But guys, kind of wanted to do one last wrap-up of the 2024-2025 winter outlook, just some of the big takeaways you guys kind of want to hit home again, let people kind of just remember and stick with them as we continue to progress through the rest of winter.
Well, yeah, here we are on the 19th of November. I mean, clearly a pretty slow start to the season. We haven't seen flakes just yet, but it does appear that as we go into December, Blake touched on how it's been historically fairly quiet, but it looks like this year we're in line to see a good amount of snow next month. There's a good chance of some cold air hits since we are going to be in this more disrupted polar vortex pattern. That does also come with a greater chance of some thaws, though, so that'll help to kind of lessen the blow to some extent. The second half of winter, we're still kind of figuring things out some, but at this point it appears that there will be near or slightly less than average snowfall totals as we go through the winter season here.
All right, awesome. Well, definitely stuff to keep in mind. Want to get to a few questions now for the two of you. Seth, thank you so much for watching. He's asking, when do we expect the first plowable snow to come in? We touched on that we could be seeing a few flakes every now and again, but it's, again, the matter of how long is that snow going to stay for, and will we need to, again, break out those snow plows?
It's a hard one. I would say we're getting the atmosphere primed. So I think, as we mentioned, with an active December, I think once things get going, they're going to get going pretty quickly. I wouldn't be too surprised if our first plowable snow occurs in the next few weeks, personally, only because we get down to the 40s tomorrow, low 40s, and then we stay there for the foreseeable future. So that's going to start cooling off the ground temperatures, and we're starting to see in some of our models that almost each time a system comes through after the system on Wednesday, there's at least some sort of mix of rain and snow in there. So I would say probably not too far off. Again, it's I don't want to say it's random, but it's hard to pinpoint this far out, and it really just depends on the timing and the track of any specific storm system. But
yeah, and we've been in a pretty active pattern. It looks like that'll continue through this week, and forecast models kind of showing that next week we're going to have a parade of systems also. So we'll have to see if we can catch on to a larger snow total event out of that, but I think it's probably going to be coming in the near future.
yeah.
And another question I want to get to real quick, because I feel like it's one that I myself am having, but I'm sure a lot of other people might also be wondering this. It is from Maurice. Maurice, thank you so much for watching. He's asking, the winters are getting shorter and shorter. I mean, we saw a couple of the graphs that kind of suggest that same thing. If this continues, could we potentially, and this may be years down the road, could we potentially be hitting a point where we're not getting any snow, or maybe nothing that sticks for a whole entire season potentially?
No, I think what we're seeing more of is there's no doubt that our winters have been warmer. In fact, I believe each of our last 10 winters, with the exception of 2013, 2014, have been warmer than average. So what that means is that we still get these cold air hits, we still get visits from the polar vortex, but it gets a little harder for that to stick around for an extended period of time. And that's being seen across the country, where we have more temperature swings and more visits with liquid precipitation, with rain or very wet snow or stuff that's easy to melt. So I don't think we'll ever get to that point, but it is interesting how, at least the way we've been trending over the last 10 years, is that it's harder and harder to hang on to our snow, even when we get a lot of it.
Yeah. I think that there's a greater tendency for larger swings and variability from winter to winter. But as far as a winter where there's just no snow or no accumulating snow, it's pretty difficult to envision that anytime soon.
Yeah.
One can hope, though.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, Phil. I'm sorry to break that news to
Hey,
you.
you know
Burst
what?
the bubble.
In some instances, if I'm not driving, I'm all about the snow. If I get to stay at home, I'm okay with that. But speaking of the snow, guys, one thing that we are bringing back again this year that we want our viewers to kind of also participate in is the total snowfall prediction contest. It is live now. Again, we are going to be taking all of the guesses that people send in, going through them, and whoever gets closest to the total number of snow that falls between November 28th and I believe it's
March.
March 31st, correct? So
Yep.
so no snow that happens before then, if we do get any. No snow that happens after March 31st, which hopefully we don't have to deal with that either. Just the snow that falls in that parameter. You are going to guess how many inches we are going to get over that period of time, and then the closest person that predicts it correctly will be receiving a $250 gift card, courtesy of us here over at Storm News Channel 8. So again, just something to keep an eye on. You can go ahead and head on over to woodtv.com right now and really start planning, you know, maybe taking into account the winter outlook, maybe this conversation we just had, and making your best guess. Guys, do you guys have any guesses, estimates? I don't want you guys to give anybody that's watching maybe an unfair advantage, but would you maybe say closer to 50, above 50? We'll make 50 sort of the marker here.
Okay.
Do we have our guesses published somewhere?
I think we said them last week, so I
Yeah.
would say yes.
Okay.
If you've got official guesses,
Yeah.
let's hear them.
We've got our official guesses. Mine
Yeah.
is 65 inches.
Okay.
Again, average for Grand Rapids is 77. So I think we're going to come in a little bit below normal. But even still, I think that we're going to get a couple of good systems that come through, some heavy snow events. It should be more than last year, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I went a little bit higher only because, not by much, I went 73. Grand Rapids has weirdly been the bullseye for a lot of our lake effect snow events. And all it's going to take is one or two big lake effect events for our numbers to be blown out of the water, or the other way around if we don't get it. I do want to point out, I forget the woman's name who won last year, and I do forget her guess too, but I remember 2 winters ago, when we had our third snowiest, we had 110.1 inches, and someone guessed 110.
Wow.
And was within a tenth of an inch. So it is possible. People have done it, and I know the woman last year was very, very close, within an inch as well. So, and that was one of our less snowy winters we've had in Grand Rapids. So on either side of the spectrum, we have guesses, and that's exciting to see who's going to come out on top.
And you can't win if you don't play.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. I was going to guess 1 inch, but I don't think that's going to be very good.
Are you going by like Price is Right rules?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You can't go over, but that's not how we're playing it. So unfortunately, that idea is not going to be working in my favor. Plus, I don't think I could keep that $250. It just wouldn't feel right, I don't think.
Sure.
And before we go, again, if anybody has any last-minute questions that you want to ask Scott or Blake, please feel free to drop them down below. We're about to say goodbye on this stream, but Blake, before we go, I know a lot of people are missing your school closing predictions. Are you feeling at all sort of sad about not making any yet at this time?
No, because we're still finishing up the touches for this winter. It always comes a little sooner than we want. Last year it came Halloween.
Right.
And so it's been nice to have a little bit of extra time to make sure everything's buttoned up and we're ready. Excited to roll out another year of the predictions. And I do think, obviously it depends on what day of the week the snow comes, but I do think we'll have a pretty active year of school closing chances. So.
All right. Well, if you're watching this and you've got kids at home, you heard it here from Blake. Expect maybe a little bit more. Expect your kids to maybe pay a little bit more attention to Blake, especially on those school nights, as we expect more winter weather coming this way. Guys, thanks so much for stopping by. I know a lot of people really do appreciate this sort of conversation flow and getting sort of an outlook at the weather and the winter weather that's coming up. And pretty pleased to see that we're at least going to be somewhat snow-free for at least a little bit longer.
At least a little bit. But once it comes,
Get ready
it comes
for
in a
it.
hurry.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. Hey, I got my boots in my car. I'm ready to
Good.
go whenever. So,
Good.
Again, thanks guys so much for stopping by. I do want to remind everybody one last time about the Total Snowfall Prediction Contest that is going live right now. If you head on over to woodtv.com, you can go ahead and submit your guesses. Again, you have until November 27th to submit all of those guesses. And again, it's just from November 28th to March 31st, just the snow that falls in that time. Scott and Blake, thank you so much for stopping by once again. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Of course. I want to thank everybody else for tuning in to this latest edition of the News 8 Live Desk. I'm Phil Pinarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.